Well, good day to you, and this is our second in the series of 6 lectures on the Survey of Western Art 2, and today we're going to review Romanticism and Realism in Western art, mainly looking at France, but as we'll see today, also looking a little bit at Spain and a little bit at England. And here are the approximate dates, going from about 1700 for Rococo to the French Revolution to 1820 for Neoclassicism. The two styles, Romanticism and Realism, then coming after 1800. Romanticism predating Realism slightly, and we'll see exactly why. And last lecture, we saw mainly works in France. Today we'll see in France, Spain, that's Madrid down south, and London up north in England as well. And this was an example of the last lecture on Rococo. And one thing we looked at was the aristocracy and how their wealth and their abundance led to what might be called romantic or frivolous subjects. The subjects that did not really deal with the everyday lives of the people, but then again, the aristocracy would not have really been in tune with that. Who wants to hang a picture on your wall of starving poor peasants? You would much rather do this kind of romantic silliness as Fragonard did in The Swing. We saw, though, with neoclassical times, though, that the coming of the French Revolution and during the French Revolution itself, that there was a dissatisfaction with contemporary art and contemporary life. And focusing on the dissatisfaction, the artists looked backward with the notion that things were so much better with those noble Greeks and Romans. And here we see that example in David's Oath of the Horatii. Even though it was a play, it really wasn't a reality, but the notion that war is messy and political upheaval will be long and drawn out. They had no idea how long and drawn out it would be. French Revolution started in 1789. For a decade, it was that reign of terror till 99. This picture we saw last time also by David, the rape of the Sabine women, really is historical in terms of the subject matter, but contemporary in terms of who's being depicted, because that woman in white with her hands out there is stopping the Sabines and the Romans from fighting over the women and saying, stop, we'll stay where we are, we'll stay with the Romans. And it was the women during the French Revolution who, in some cases, you could say started it all, but then instigated, and then who really called for its stop. So today we're going to look at Romanticism. And one thing about Romanticism, it's not romantic. Roman, R-O-M-A-N, means story. So there are stories to be told here. And the icon of Romanticism is this painting by Gericault, the Raft of the Medusa. The Medusa was a frigate, a ship that left Paris, left France in 1818. It was destined for Senegal, just off the coast of Senegal is where it ran into a sandbar, crashed, and the over 150 people on board had to climb upon self-made rafts. That's what we're looking at here. And just in case you wonder about this picture, it's 24 feet wide. It is huge. I think it's the largest in the Louvre. Gericault did this in his late 20s. Now, it is historically, well, perhaps accurate only because everybody knew what had happened. Here's the story. You see, the ship left, and France wanted to get rid of its dissidents, including black people, in Paris. And they said, right, you don't like it here, then off you go. And then they went on the ship. The ship, by the way, was captained by someone who did not have proper credentials. He went very quickly and crashed. But that's not the entire story. What happened was there weren't enough lifeboats on this frigate, and the captain and his crew went on lifeboats and they attached a rope to this homemade raft that over 150 had to climb upon. And after the first night, someone cut the rope, and this raft was left adrift. Um, Long story short is that there were only 10 survivors. Some say 15, but between 10 and 15 survivors. Gericault saw the story, as everyone did in the newspapers, and he then went and interviewed 2 of these people in detail. By the way, they survived through starvation and cannibalism. And so it's pretty hairy. Here you see in what is otherwise a very painterly picture. Notice, unlike neoclassical, you can't see the borders or the outlines of the colors. They kind of all run together here. And a pyramid of bodies seems to be swooping on up to that black man at the very top, this pinnacle. Kind of interesting here, the outcast being the hero. And what they're waving to, you can see in the distance in this slide, is the frigate that is going to save them, or save the few that in fact survive. This is Romanticism, a dissatisfaction with contemporary art and life, just like Romanticism, Neoclassicism. But in Romanticism, it's a dissatisfaction and focusing on contemporary, not going back to the idealism of beforehand. We see that here in Delacroix's painting, The Death of Sardanapalus, also, by the way, in the Louvre, a fairly large picture, about 5 feet wide. But this is not a story of historical accuracy. It's from a novel that was written by Lord Byron, who died about 5 years earlier in his fight for freedom of Greece. Here, Sardanapalus is the potentate, the king in a Mideastern kingdom, and here he has just lost his war, and basically he has given the word to his soldiers that since the enemy is going to be overriding his kingdom momentarily, he wants all of his harem girls slaughtered, and he wants his prize Arabian horses slaughtered. And that's what's happening here. Amidst all this energy and movement here, he's just lying in bed like he's a couch potato. Huh? This notion that all hell is breaking loose is part of Romanticism. It's kind of hard to see some of these pictures. You almost have to look and be told what's going on. Here, Delacroix, another picture by Delacroix, Liberty Leading the People. Remember I said the French Revolution started in 1789. Well, when Napoleon gets in at 1800, things don't calm down at all, and they continue. Here from 1831, a painting of the Revolution of July of 28 of 1830. And here, Liberty, this mythical, iconic French woman carrying the tricorder. Only the French would do this. She's kind of topless. But anyhow, but the little boy on the right and the businessman on the left and the soldier on the left, all joining, and they're crawling over bodies because there are riots in the streets. I mean, these are Parisian streets. Look in the background on the right. That's Notre Dame. Those 2 towers sticking up there. This dissatisfaction with contemporary life by focusing on contemporary life and stories. This doesn't happen only, by the way, in France. So when we go down to Spain, we look at the works by Goya, Francesco Goya. And his version of Romanticism, this picture is called May 2nd, 1808. It's done in 1814, 6 years later. But it's May 2nd, 1808. And what happened was the French troops were allowed into Spain and decided to take over Spain. The French troops did. And the Spaniards then revolted. And this is the revolt, right? So you've got troops on horses, and they have guns, and they've got good swords, etc. And you've got the locals trying to fight, and it didn't turn out very well for them. So this is, if you will, on May 2nd, this is the Spanish fighting the French. But on May 3rd are the reprisals. By the way, both paintings I just showed you are at the Prado Museum, and they hang one next to another. So this is kind of like the before and the after. They're very large paintings. They're about 8 feet wide. Here on May 3rd, 1808, it was a very short kind of revolution. The French troops were outnumbered them and had better technology. Here, they're executing the Spanish who they captured. Here you see this one man in red whose head is in his hands. He's about ready to die. And the ones beforehand who are just lying in their blood. But then there's that one guy in white and brilliant yellow who raises his hands up. Yeah, shoot me, go on. Very much of a Christ-like martyred figure. Notice this takes place at night. There's so many that they have to execute. They use, that's that big square box, it's a lantern, at night to light them up. And that's Spain in the background. The French soldiers on the right-hand side are like automatons. They're like robots. We don't see their faces. They're totally anonymous. They're not even 20 paces back. They're just firing. They just need to. So dissatisfaction through war, I'm showing you mostly because that was the beginning of the 19th century. Goya did other paintings that are example of Romanticism, like this one. El sueño de la razón produce monstruos. The sleep of reason produces monsters, from 1800. This is an etching, soft ground etching. And here's a man just falling asleep, and these demons are coming. And I mean, this is what it must have seemed like. Let's go to England. There's no revolution going on in England, but psychologically there is kind of an uncomfortable position of women in society as they're talking about it. This one artist, Henri Fuseli, he was Swiss but had lived in England for a while and part of the Royal Academy now. He does this painting, very popular painting called The Nightmare. And what it shows is a woman succumbing to the incubus. You know, that little devil guy on her tummy? That's the incubus with who comes in on the devil horse. I mean, they're kind of both devils. The discussion really was women are the source of all pain and sin and evil. Really interesting psychology during this time. We see it also, this is another picture by Fuseli, illustrating a Shakespeare play. This is Macbeth, in which now Macbeth has just killed, you see his two swords, bloody knives there. He's just killed Duncan, the king of Denmark, and doesn't know what to do. I mean, he's a blabbering fool. And Lady Macbeth comes in, and she's the plotter, and she's going to take it and go on with the intrigue there. But this sense of dynamism, of danger, of dissatisfaction and death, it's part of Romanticism. So thus far, we have seen a style that really focused on the aristocracy, a style that really focused on neoclassical ideas and how good, though might not have been that good, the old times were, etc. Geez. Then comes a new philosophy, a new artist, an artist by the name of Courbet, and he calls it realism. He has a whole manifesto. You want to see the picture? This is the main picture of realism. Pow. I mean, what's controversial about this? I mean, just by comparison to the others, there's no war, there's nobody dying, it's a guy going for a walk. You see the path there. In fact, that guy is Courbet himself. The title of the work, Bonjour, Monsieur Courbet, which is Good Day, Mr. Courbet, it's his main patron taking his hat off to Courbet. He's got his servant there, and the dog stands obedient. Look, it's the artist elevating himself. Look, I'm an artist, and is ever so proud. you could see the implication here is Courbet's out for a walk with his drawing pad, etc., on his back, walking stick, and then his patron notices him and stops the coach. You see the coach in the far right here. This is realism. What is realism about? Well, it's stripping away the politics, sort of, but keeping the social relationships very strong. See, before, an artist is simply a workman, an artisan. But the artist is saying now, I'm just as good as you. Well, listen, Courbet could not have painted a picture like that if the patron had not agreed that they should be on equal social footing, although financially, of course, they're very different. This is realism. And it reflects more life in the big city and life stripping away some of those traditional social mores. It may be hard to see that in this picture, the young ladies of the village, but here you have three city dwellers, and they came out to this area to see a young barefoot farm girl and her dog and the two cows. I mean, the girl's out there watching the cows. These three ladies stand out. They simply don't fit in there. But it's a contrast, isn't it, between the farm girl and then the wealth of these ladies and the communication. They're both very active, very real, but very, very different. We're not seeing a dissatisfaction. We're seeing, in a sense, more of a measure of what life is like in Paris at the moment. Not the least of which, if not for Courbet, the main purveyor of realism is an artist whose name is Manet. And here is Manet. Manet's work, Olympia, at the Musée d'Orsay. Here Manet depicts his favorite model, Victorine Meurent, laid out as if a prostitute, and calls her Olympia, like a Greek or a Roman god or goddess. But she's not. She's just a naked lady, a prostitute. And we see how she just stares directly out at us. There are flowers there by the black maid, and the flowers theoretically are brought by us. We're the John. In fact, we've just come in here. She stares directly at us this way, and is basically saying, "Is your dime, my time." As she's playing around, literally with the shoe on the foot. The cat on the right-hand side, you see, even goes, stands up to recognize us on here. This is not an idealized woman. This is just what modern life is like. They're prostitutes. It's really funny. Manet was never accepted by any of the art groups of the time. He walked around looking like a banker, but then would paint these sorts of images that would offend most people's tender sensibilities. Here, Manet's very large picture, it's about 8 feet wide, also at the Musée d'Orsay, Dejeuner sur l'herbe, Luncheon on the grass. And it shows 2 contemporary men and 2 women. One woman in the background is lifting her skirts up, holding her primary sexual area, but lifting her skirts up so they don't get wet. But this other one seems to have just taken her clothes off in the middle of a lunch. You see the clothes there, and you see the food around, and the men aren't thinking much of it one way or another. I mean, this breaks down social barriers, and this is what Manet was really good at, though he couldn't understand why people would be so upset. Victorine Meurent, the model, loved it because she became very famous. And it's not in an idealized way. This is not some Greek goddess. No, this is a lady who's bent over. I mean, look at her. She's a little flabby. Maybe had too many French fries, etc. There's that lady in the background. And here we have the bar at the Folies-Bergere. The Folies-Bergere is that nightclub that very famous French dance was invented. The can-can, the so-called can-can. And you know Bizet's song. Here, in the midst of all of this energy and all of this excitement, we see this girl. Actually, it's us talking to this young girl. By the way, that's us in the mirror on the right-hand side in our bowler hat and our little mustache. And it's not a romantic conversation. She's not swooning over us. It's like I don't know what he's doing. He's making an order for the drinks in front, or asking her out, or whatever. But look at the background. That's not actually the background. That's a mirror. See, we see the back of her. So that's all the excitement all around. Look, you've probably been in places like that too, where you've gone to a big party and you are so alone. You know, but that's part of being in a big city. That's modern life. That's realism. Here, she looks so alone. Now, this is not a lonely scene by any means, but this is a very real scene. Traditional scenes of mothers and children. The mother is 100% doting over her loving little child. Look at this version by Manet. First, Manet shows modern technology. The kid is not in jail. That's a fence because it's a railroad in the background. And the newest technology, that train is steaming on by. The kid is looking at it. What's the mother doing? Mother doesn't even recognize the kid. Look at the mother's hand. The mother is reading a book. She's not doting over her cute little puppy or her lovely little child. No, she's an intellectual. She's allowed to. This is something that's not too surprising maybe for us now, but back then it really was. This is realism, to break down the boundaries, the social boundaries. Here's another example of a man and a woman in a conservatory. A conservatory where the flowers are in glass enclosed, so you can walk during winter. They're having a conversation. Now, we don't know what this conversation is, but it doesn't look like it's a hot and heavy romantic discussion of any sort. He's talking to her, she's listening, not even looking at him. She's a complete individual. This is realism. This is life in the big city. This is very different than the styles we've seen before. Manet is not liked for this, but this becomes an art style that will then breed the next style that we will see, known as Impressionism, when we do next Tuesday. But remember, on Thursday, this Thursday, we have an exam, well, a quiz. So just log in to UD Online, and at 12:15, you'll see the essay question. Best of luck. Look at the PDF. Bye-bye.